Hello, BookTube. I want to make a couple of encouragement videos back to back here. And the first one I want to do is nonfiction, specifically spurred on to do so by Nonfiction November, which is an event that's being hosted by Gemma at Nonfiction Books and Olive at a Book Olive. Throughout the month of November, they are encouraging you to read more nonfiction than you ordinarily do. They've set up four very broad category challenges to help you give structure to that if you need it. But the real encouragement is just to try more nonfiction. And I heartily second that encouragement. It's an amazing reading experience, and I have been emailed many times over the course of this little adventure of ours by a great many of you wanting to know how to start or where to start, saying that you wish you read more nonfiction, but that it looks so big or intimidating that you don't know how to begin. And I wanted to make a video encouraging you to try, and encouraging you to try use Nonfiction November as the means to try. You have a big bunch of people who are going to be doing this at the same time, and I wanted to list a few things, a few pieces of advice to maybe help you out, starting with a tool for chipping away into nonfiction that no other generation has had, an amazing thing that has never existed in the world until now. Now, that ought to encourage you, if anything does. And I'm referring to Wikipedia, which is infinite and crowdsourced and full of experts and literally at your fingertips all the time. So, unlike previous generations where you would get a volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica in the mail, and eventually you would build a whole set and you were stuck with the limits of that set. Unlike that, you have Wikipedia, which is, if you are interested for some godforsaken reason in bovine diseases, well, if you looked up bovine diseases in Encyclopedia Britannica, you would get 900 very well-informed words, and that would be the end of it. That would be all there was. A couple would be mentioned, and that's it. You look up that on Wikipedia, you get the whole world of bovine diseases, pictures, presentations, molecular disposition, everything that you could ever want, with all of the sources listed below. Most of them hot linkable, so that you can go right away and get the book if you want. It's not just, of course, veterinary. The amazing thing about Wikipedia is that it's infinite. It covers every single aspect of human knowledge, and you have that where no one else has. So if you want to know about the Battle of Lepanto, or the natural history of the lemur, or a million things that school children and curious adults for the last 200 generations you've been curious about that, they've had nowhere to go. You have somewhere to go, and it's an incredible somewhere. It's not a stopgap. But once you've got that to take the top spin off any subject that you're interested in, the approach that I always advise is to start small, because nonfiction is big and sprawling and highly detailed, so it can look a little intimidating if you're unfamiliar with reading it. So pick something small, a little thing, maybe from school, that interested you, a person, a battle, a place, a book, something small, something circumscribed, and learn about that thing, and use that learning as a home base to move to something else. And you will find that the learning about that thing suggests the avenues of where to go. I think it's why genealogy is so incredibly popular as an intellectual endeavor. And I think it's why so many amateur genealogists go on to become major history buffs, because they realize that history is connected to people. Of course, it's composed of people. These are real stories. This is the world that you are learning to pull apart thread by thread until it makes immediate personal sense to you. And that is the small scale version of what reading nonfiction in the large scale is all about. And, I don't mean to make it sound completely egalitarian. Of course, there are levels to nonfiction, like there are to anything. There are entry levels for nonfiction, the type of stuff that sells well on nonfiction lists, like sports memoirs, or celebrity tell-alls, or pet books, or illness memoirs, stuff like that. This has been going on all day. 70 emergency vehicles have passed this house in the last hour. 70 of them. Boston has 121. So if you're on the other side, if you're in East Boston and you have an apartment fire, good luck, because I know where all the fire engines are, and they're not anywhere near you. And also, they're not necessary. If a small scale dirty nuclear bomb went off in Roxbury, 40 emergency response vehicles are all that could logistically be used. 70 response vehicles means people are bored. That's all there is to it. 70 response vehicles are going to get in each other's way. They are going to do more harm than good. It's just a little rant. This is not the first, nor the second, nor the third, nor the fourth time that I've tried to make this video, as 70 vehicles have blazed past my house to a burning kitchen somewhere in Roxbury. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is that even those entry levels for nonfiction have great examples, stuff that's really worth your time to read. Like, for instance, celebrity tell-alls. There's a book called The $1 Million Mermaid about Esther Williams, the Queen of Chlorine. A fantastic read that will lead you to histories of Broadway and MGM and major musicals. There's, for illness metaphors or memoirs, there's Blindsided by Richard Cohen, an amazing book, but a guy who just couldn't catch a break physically. First one thing wrong, then the next, and how he coped with it and his family coped with it. For ghost-written sports autobiographies, there's one that's on bookstore shelves now, 99 Stories by Wayne Gretzky, the great one. Now, Wayne Gretzky certainly didn't sit down with a pad of paper and write these things. They were ghost-written for him, but they definitely have his voice, and it's a fantastic read, especially if you're interested in hockey. And for pet stories, of course, there are a million of them. But the one that I wrote down just now is Ted Karasotti's Merle's Door, which is tremendously effective, especially, of course, the last chapters. But those are beginner nonfiction. That's nonfiction at an entry level. Of course, the big leagues for nonfiction are history and biography. Which can sometimes be very long, they can be very detailed, very scholarly, and they're usually written by people who have made a study of these subjects for years. And I admit, I mean, that's my favorite kind of reading, but I admit that can look like a closed door to a general reader, and it shouldn't, because those people all started somewhere, and what they're talking about starts at Wikipedia, no matter what it starts at Wikipedia. So if there's a new biography, for instance, there is a new 800-page biography of Frederick the Great, well, or Frederick Barbarossa, or Charlemagne. There are huge biographies of these people that are new, that are in bookstores, but the basic intelligently presented outline of their lives is an encyclopedia entry, whether it's Wikipedia or anything else. That you familiarize yourself with that 1,200 words, and you know enough to start. Now, the key understanding here is that all narrative is world building, not just science fiction or even fiction. All of it is world building, and you can judge its success or failure by how good it is at world building. That's true for a biography as much as it is for a work of fantasy. If the author should be cupping you in his hand. He should be telling you a story that he wants you to appreciate, which means he has to give you the tools to appreciate it. If he doesn't do that, and he claims to be writing a biography, he's not. He's writing a monograph. He's writing a specialty production aimed squarely at other specialists. But if he's not doing that, if he's writing a general work for a general audience, then he will build the world for you. And you won't need much beyond that. You might need something, but you won't need much more. And plenty of people that I know on BookTube and off BookTube love, for instance, Game of Thrones, or the latest big piece of contemporary fiction that's making the rounds and getting everybody to talk about it. Those things world build. The characters, even in a contemporary novel that's set in present-day Massachusetts, where all of the demotic markers are exactly the same as you know them, there's still a ton of world building that goes on. Those characters all have past that interconnect with each other, that feed into the present, that shape the present and the way things will happen. And the author has to tell you all those things, because the author hasn't started the book at the birth of all these characters. So the reason why it's slightly more palatable in fiction or fantasy or science fiction is because it's woven in better than a lot of bad nonfiction. The point I'm trying to make is that good nonfiction weaves it in just as well. I could give many examples, but the main thing I want you to realize is that you already have the reading skills necessary to tackle any popular biography and history, because you already have the skills you need to decode world building. All you have to do is shift it to another genre. That's all. It's not a different procedure. It's the same procedure. So those genres are open to you. And I highly encourage you to give them a try for Nonfiction November. I'd be happy to make recommendations for anything that you want to do, but I would urge you not to let length be the off-putting factor here. Like, for instance, Antonia Fraser's book, Mary Queen of Scots. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's fantastic to read, but it's not short. It's a long book, but it's fantastic to read. And she is a very good example. Her mother was the same way, and her daughter is the same way. She's a very good example of holding the reader in her hand while she tells her story, so that you don't need more than that book by much. Maybe a little here and there. And once you realize that and start to read these things and then cross-check them against others, I mean, Olive from a book Olive could tell you that this part of what I'm saying is true. If you read one biography of Catherine the Great, okay, then you know the broad outline and detail of her life. If you read a second biography, all of a sudden, in addition to the ways that author is telling that story again, you realize the ways in which that author is interpreting it different from the first one. And it's thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling in a way that a contemporary novel can never be, because no one is ever going to tell that novel a second time. if you know what I mean. Philip Roth's Indignation. Heck of a book. But no one's ever going to tell Indignation a second way. When you read it, you're done with it. You can reread it, maybe find facets of it that you didn't see the first time. But when you read a biography of Hitler, and then you read a second biography of Hitler, or a third, or Hitler's own books, the fascination is multiplied 1,000-fold. And that anybody can do. So I'm not saying that will happen in Nonfiction November, but the point of this video was to encourage you to try, encourage you to dip your toe in that world, because it's for everybody, and it's amazingly fun. It's an amazing adventure once you get into it. So that's the only harangue I'll do for now. I'm sure you heard the doorbell ring. That's just about the last interruption on this video that I can take. So I'm going to go before anything much worse happens, and I'll see you soon, BookTube.